So my name is Babby, and I'm a volunteer with the American Sustainable Business Network Investors Circle chapter. And we are a nationwide network of investors, policymakers, and entrepreneurs, a rather unique organization in that regard. And I have had the pleasure of working with Pam Porter, who is an expert in the space of CDFIs. And now we have Tom Abood, part of our team, and Derek Peebles, who's now on the staff of ASBN, and very delighted to have all of you joining us. So I just want to give a brief overview of the evolution of this work. Pam and I are part of the investors part of ASBN, which stands for the American Sustainable Business Network, as you'll see on the logo. And during the time of COVID, we realized that the large banks were really not in a position to provide support to the entrepreneurs that we care so deeply about, that are doing impactful work in their communities. And so this amazing gem of a resource, and my now sister in impact, Pam, who lives in the Philadelphia region, and I got together to decide we really wanted to highlight the work of CDFIs. We know that with the 1,300 that are out there, that some are diving deeply into dismantling racism and others are scratching the surface, but they are people who live in the communities, work in the communities, and care deeply about making an impact. So we put together, thank you, Pam, a tremendous resource that Andrew can pop in the chat, and I've sent out in emails of resources to do due diligence for whether you're an institution or you're an individual, to learn more about these organizations. But not only that, out of the 1,300, we've identified 70 that are in a position to take individual investments. We know there are more out there. We value your input, and we hope you'll help us shape this work moving forward. But then we had this amazing member of our organization, Tom, in Colorado, who realized that why would we limit this to individuals, that the Unitarians, and you'll hear more from Vanessa and Tom, why wouldn't they invest their endowments into these community-based organizations that are FDI insured and on the ground and doing the important work we care about? So Tom did a phenomenal program last August. He got 120 people registered. And when he came back and said, let's do it again, I said, let's open it up to all faiths, because spirituality and blessed community applies across all faiths. So now we are in the very starting phases of building a beloved community that Derek and Tom will address more in detail, and hoping that you'll join us on this journey as we shape this work. We have 3 more sessions planned for 2022, plus our ASBN conference. But we welcome all of you to help us look at our resources, look at our website, provide insight, and provide input as we move more deeply into impactful investing in community work. So please, Andrew, thank you very much for doing the technical support here. He'll pop our emails in the chat at some point. And we just ask you to reach out and tell us if you're interested in continuing this work, if this is of interest to you and your faith-based organizations, or you as an individual, and if you'd like to participate in this work moving forward. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Babby. And as Babby said, this basically, the connection was, we did a virtual presentation last year it was a combination of our endowment committee and also the Green First Task Force at First Universalist Church of Denver. And after that was back in August of last year. And since that, we basically, as a congregation in May of this year, we voted to adopt the 8th principle. And Andrew, could you go to the next slide, please?
Are you going to address the disclaimer? I missed that part. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, well, yeah, this is anytime this is an educational process here. We're not giving advice on any one specific investment. So just please read this. And this is pretty much a normal disclaimer for these kind of presentations. So I'll give you a couple There we go. All right. So the next one, I referred to the 8th principle, which our church adopted in May of this year. And as a result of that, we felt our endowment committee and also the Green First Task Force and the Racial Justice Task Force and our church really collaborated to move forward with another presentation. And that's when I reached out to Babby. We were going to call it Beyond Wall Street 2. Our first one was Beyond Wall Street 1, and that was basically Beyond Wall Street Community Investing. So the 8th principle was a real catalyst for us going forward. And one of the reasons why we're all here today was really about developing really what we're talking about is a beloved community that to really accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions. So building a beloved community is going to take a lot more than just a few UUs. It's going to take everybody working together on this. And next slide, Andrew. You know, we've probably all heard a lot about beloved community. And while Dr. King certainly popularized beloved community, as you can see from the slide, it's been around for a long time, and I think was really coined by Josiah Royce, who founded the Fellowship of Reconciliation. And I've done a little research on beloved community. We refer to it a lot in our church, and there's really no one definition, but there are some real dominant themes of beloved community that come out. And some of the common themes I found are recognizing that we are all interconnected and that our individual well-being is linked to the well-being of others. Reconciliation, caring, respect, dignity, and love. The first definition here is the Unitarian Universalist definition as relates to the 8th principle. We actually had a leadership meeting in our church this Sunday, and our senior minister read us 3 more UU definitions of beloved community. So like I say, there's really no one definition, but it embodies all of this in terms of love and dignity and mutual respect. And one that I really liked is the last one here that I found on the internet, that beloved community is creating a community, a society, a nation where everyone is seen, everyone is respected, where everyone is enabled to thrive, and everyone is able to realize their God-given potential. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, a lot of people in this country and throughout the world are far from thriving, and they're really struggling just to survive. These are some statistics from a featured story by the US Department of Treasury back in July of this year. And if you look at this, it's just egregious, the disparity of wealth, the disparity of income. If you look at the unemployment rates, the median household income, and the last one there, family wealth. The median white family had 184,000 in family wealth compared to just 23,000 for median Black and 38,000 for median Hispanic families. And note, there's not even really any data here about our indigenous Native American relatives, which are people who oftentimes aren't seen either. So if you look at these statistics, it's really clear that we have a wide disparity of wealth and income. And I actually was watching a public TV documentary a couple nights ago, and they referred to this, to the disparity of wealth and the gap of wealth and income as really eating the soul of this country. Next slide. This comes from some testimony back in April of last year. Once again, it's showing, while this refers to more rural distress. It really applies to urban settings as well, but 1 in 5 rural residents are people of color in this country, and more than 70% of rural Black and Native American residents live in counties that are distressed or at risk. And what this testimony was all about was the concentration of financial and economic power in this country that has really kind of dried up the flow of capital into BIPOC communities and the rural communities. They're not able to get really the capital they need for everything from their small businesses, affordable housing, renewable energy. And the testimony clearly showed that the big banks, the Wall Street banks, are not aligned with the needs of Wall Street. They have a national, global focus, and they'd rather do the mega deals. They're more about extracting the money from our communities and sending it somewhere we have no idea where it's going. And you can see the largest 4 banks provided just 16% of small business lending, really damming the flow of money. So what is this series all about? Well, the next slide, please. We're going to be talking about community development financial institutions. And this is just a brief overview. You're going to hear a lot more about it from our distinguished panelists, but this will just give you an idea here of what CDFIs, if you hear that name, what they are. And they've been around since the 1970s, really to address the inequities and inequalities in banking and economic development in this country. They're certified by the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, which is part of the U.S. Department of Treasury. And they can be banks, credit unions, loan funds, or venture capital funds. And we'll get into more detail as we go forward with the series there. But they all have community development as their primary mission. And they all are of the community that they're loaning to. So they know the community, they understand the borrowers, and they not only provide capital, but they provide technical assistance and financial counseling. CDFIs they really understand the community, and they need more capital. The big banks do not. So that's why we're here today, is for everyone to just take a look at CDFIs as being one of the tools in your toolbox to really move forward with investing to dismantle racism and inequality. Next slide, please. Actually, that's all of mine. So now I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I'll do it one at a time. And our first panelist is going to be Vanessa Lowe, and she is a Unitarian Universalist who has been an economic justice advocate and activist for more than 30 years, speaks nationally on faith-based impact investing, and has been instrumental in advising the UUA Common Endowment Fund of the importance of community investing. Vanessa, it's all yours.
Thank you, Tom. I hope everybody can hear me. Welcome, everybody, and thank you, Tom, for initiating this. Thank you, Babby, for jumping on it and giving this forum to do it in. I'm very excited to be here. I'm Vanessa Lowe, like he said. I'm an early retiree pursuing passion projects, and that includes uplifting CDFIs and other ways of dismantling racism and really moving towards reparations. I am a Unitarian Universalist. This is the website for the Unitarian Universalist Common Endowment Fund. So our overall association, which has hundreds of churches in it, has this common endowment fund that includes funds of the association, but also for churches that want to pool their funds with us and do what we call one-stop shopping. Their money is also invested in this fund. The current value is $234 million. And I have been on the association's committee managing this fund with the investment committee twice now. About 17 years ago, I got started. And that was while I was working at US Treasury's CDFI fund. I worked there for about 7 years, fell in love with the industry, and spent about 21 years overall in 3 different agencies working on access to capital for underserved communities. So on this site, and I encourage everybody to go here, you can find out all you want to know about the UU Common Endowment Fund. We have details of what we're invested in. We have our policies and things like that. So good reference. Next slide, please. So one of the ways when we got started, and this was way back in 2003, the UUA Board of Trustees encouraged our churches and districts to actively engage in community investing. And at that time, and it still is, a core strategy of what we used to call socially responsible investing. It was just sort of, the movement was just getting started, but I'm proud to say that the UUs really were early adopters. Now we sometimes call it ESG investing. I generally call it impact investing now because it can be so many different things. One of the tools that we used in order to encourage our districts and churches to join us in our commitment to doing this was we created something called the match program. And so in addition to doing direct investment ourselves into what we called our community investing portfolio, we said if a church or district makes an investment, we will match that investment up to $10,000. So in that way, we ended up building a $2 million portfolio of about 56 different loans to CDFIs over the 20 years. So back in 2003, and then I think it was 2005 when the match program came along, they made a direct commitment of 1% of the overall portfolio of the endowment fund would be committed to community investing. When I came back on the committee in 2020, I proposed, and I was surprised they accepted it, but let's say that that's been around a really long time. Let's move it up to 5%. And so they did. So we'll see a slide that covers our new opportunity. Next slide, please. So in the material that we developed and was just updated a couple of years ago when I came back on, one of the things we did was I created this table of the resources for communities, for CDFIs. And it is a table of the trade associations and other key resources. So it's actually really easy to find CDFIs now. You've got the CDFI fund themselves, that's a division of US Treasury. You can go onto their site and literally download the whole database of all of the certified CDFIs. Then you've got trade associations like the one here in Philadelphia's Opportunity Finance Network. You've got the Venture Capital Alliance. Inclusive is focused on credit unions. And then you've even got a bankers association. Next slide, please. So this slide is showing some of the resources and tools that I shared in a presentation that I did, we developed, the Common Endowment Committee developed for our 2020 General Assembly. So that's our national conference. And that was it was online only. And we had usually, because when I was on the committee before, maybe if we got 15 or 20 people in the room for our money presentation, that would be good because there's a lot of competition for sessions. We were so excited because we had, I think, almost 180 people attend this session. And that session that you see at the top is called Money is Medicine. Actually, this was the sustainable, I forget. Anyway, this session, I did this, my presentation, which is about 15 minutes long in 2 different sessions. And this is the Money is Medicine one. You can go there. If you go to 1 hour and 5 minutes and 16 seconds, you'll see that 15-minute presentation that talks you through literally how to get into CDFI investing, including the 5 steps, like building the team of advocates. This is not just your finance people. You've got to get your justice people involved. And then some key learning resources. I just want to really lift up Edgar Villanueva's Decolonizing Wealth book. Absolutely fantastic resource. Great tool for bringing folks together and actually starting the conversation around what is the source of this wealth that foundation endowments are largely holding. The source of the wealth was stolen land, stolen bodies, stolen labor from particularly Native Americans and Africans. So he does that. He talks about that very well. He talks about 7 steps for decolonizing the portfolio. Next slide, please. So this is the summary of where we are now with our community investing portfolio. Essentially, we've got a $9 million opportunity because we increased the commitment. This is back from April. We had a value of 247 million. So our commitment at that time then would have been 12.35 million, which would have been the 5%. Right now, I think it's still about the same at 2.89 million, which is about 62 different notes. Predominantly, I think at least 95% of those notes are to community development financial institutions, certified CDFIs. So we've got 9.46 million now, and we've been through a process of actually doing some really deep training and understanding on racial justice investing. We're going to hire a community investing consultant to really help us move forward and move into something even more sort of current. And CDFIs are wonderful. I absolutely support them. They've been around for a long time now, and they're getting amazing support from the federal government, from investors. So we're looking to move to sort of what is the next thing that's really not getting as much funding. Next slide, please. So I want to profile about three, and I think Derek is keeping time for me, Derek, so let me know when I'm running out of time. But I do want to do a brief introduction of just three different investments and talk about them and why they're so impactful. This is a picture of workers at a Windows company in the Boston area. The owner of the company, elderly white man, he was getting older, had the company running for about 30 years. Most of the staff are people of color, as you can see. And he didn't have kids who wanted to take over the business. He hadn't really done any planning or moving forward. So he literally just locked the doors one day. Well, the staff started showing up and just sort of protesting, like, what's going on? And why didn't you let us know? And so eventually they got connected with a group called Seed Capital, a CDFI up in that area. And this Seed Capital is a certified CDFI. They actually had started out working internationally, focused on worker ownership. And now that is their focus here in the United States. They did some training and lots of meetings with these workers, brought the owner to the table. Long story short, these workers are now the owners of that business, and that founder is nicely retiring and spending time with his grandchildren. Seed Capital, wonderful CDFI. Next slide, please. The next one is Ujima. So Ujima is getting a lot of attention these days because it is really operating under community participation lending. This also is in the Boston area. And this is just about how they invested $80,000 in this arts and cultural ecosystem and had these wonderful events. But they literally bring together the community members, and how they got started was they came together with the community and said, well, what are the businesses you like in the area? Who do you think we should lend to? Let's talk about it. And you have these wonderful pictures of them literally putting stickers around the walls. So that helped them to build the list of potential businesses to reach out to and say, hey, we are a new CDFI in the area. We want to help support you. And the criteria for these businesses, I believe, is either needs to be Black, Indigenous, people of color, and or low income. And so they've been doing really, really wonderful work, and now spreading that message and those tools about how do you engage the entire community in the process. So once they had the list, they did their due diligence with their professional, staff, but then they go back to the community and say, okay, here's the list of ones who have said that they want a loan and who we're thinking about. Do you have any other feedback for us? What do you think? Rank them, and that's how we'll decide. So continuous engagement with the community on this. Love them. Next slide, please. And then this is the last example that's near and dear to my heart, just because I've been following her for years. This is Della Clark, Executive Director of the Enterprise Center, which has been operating in the Philadelphia area where I live for about 30 years now. Yeah. And she's headed it the whole time. So and it started out as an incubator where they would work with, they both rented space to budding entrepreneurs, but also did deep training on how do you start your business, anything from, the the marketing of it, the financials of it, all sorts of things. She made kind of history because she is the first CDFI that has used the SBA's SBIC, Small Business Investment Corporation tool. And essentially it's a venture capital fund, particularly targeted to Black entrepreneurs. And her quote here was, Clark hopes her new SBIC called the Innovative Capital Growth Fund can help bump up the numbers, because only about 60 out of 1,000 SBIC investments every year are in companies owned by women, people of color, or veterans. So those are just 3 examples of really innovative, wonderful, sort of CDFIs really doing cutting edge stuff. Because again, they've been around for quite a while now, but I really love to see those that are doing some new ways of really engaging with the community and using new tools. Next slide, please. That may be it though. Yeah, so to learn more, we, the UUCEF, the Common Endowment Fund, we actually hold quarterly investor update meetings, and those are by Zoom. And now we've started to always profile one of our community investments. And so I encourage you to sign up for those. I think the next one's going to be in December. Yeah, I hope we'll have questions later. I do want to throw in one more thing. Go to the next slide though, just to make sure I don't have anything else, please. So there's a show. Okay, there's a show that's coming on public television. It's called Opportunity Knocks. Look for it. And here in Philadelphia, it's going to be available on PBS through the Passport streaming service. And what it is it's essentially a reality TV show that is profiling CDFIs by following, I think in the first season, it's 6 different families who are struggling financially. They essentially get them connected with CDFIs, and you see them work with those CDFIs to change their lives by working with the CDFIs. I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vanessa. Our second panelist is Andrew Schneiderman, who is Director of Impact Investing at the San Francisco Jewish Community Federation and Endowment Fund. Andrew is using his entrepreneur skills to create new pathways to provide fair and affordable credit to underbanked communities locally and nationally. All yours, Andrew.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate you joining all. Thank you to Babby and Derek and Pam as well. Wanted to start off by just getting some context to sort of what is the Jewish Federation, talking more specifically about our organization here in San Francisco, and then launching into more of sort of my role or my focus to date as it relates to impact investing with our work. So what is Jewish, besides sort of building on the Embarcadero here in San Francisco, historically, Jewish federations are sort of community-wide secular Jewish nonprofit organizations that raise money to fund local grantees, both Jewish and non-Jewish, as well as grantees in Israel and Jewish needs around the world. So they were initially set up in the late 18th century, late 19th century, early 20th century, to really focus on serving the basic needs of impoverished and disadvantaged Jews in their local communities, and it has evolved to broader focus on building Jewish identity and community. Next slide. So where are we today? There's actually 146 Jewish federations in North America alone, with the first one being founded in Boston in 1895, and our organization here founded in around 1910. Next slide. So today, for Bay Area Jews, allies, and friends who want to connect with and contribute to their communities, the Jewish Community Federation Endowment Fund, the Federation for short, is the heart of Jewish philanthropy in the Bay Area. So our work centers around 3 strategic pillars. That's enabling personal philanthropy through philanthropic advising, that's around Jewish, non-Jewish causes and organizations, facilitating collaborative philanthropy among our donors to address critical issues locally, nationally, and globally, and then fundraising for a Jewish community impact-focused portfolio of programs and initiatives. So all of this work is really guided by Jewish values like tzedakah, that's giving with just intention, tikkun olam, that's healing the world, kahila, building community, and tzedek, pursuing justice. And it's really these pillars, right, guided by Jewish values, along with our historical communal experiences with forms of systemic oppression leveled against us as anti-Semitism, that really encourages us, enables us to stand up against racism and inequality in all of its forms. Next slide. So how do we put SDOC into practice? I think for me and my work at the organization, it really starts with our philanthropic assets under management. We are humbled to be entrusted with significant philanthropic assets from our donor community. That's over $2 billion. And over half of those assets are with donor advised funds and supporting foundations for which we are the sponsor organization. And much of those funds are invested and deployed as grants over time. Next slide. So my role here and my work and goals are really centered around aligning, at least to date, has been aligning personal philanthropic investments with our organizational values, the Jewish values I named, by moving capital out of public markets and into direct community investing. That's with CDFIs or other nonprofit lenders through impact first debt vehicles, sort of what we call here amongst our donors impact lending. Next slide. So why impact lending? We really see it as an extension of grant making, and we even see this as going back to rabbinical teachings of the 12th century with Rabbi Moses Maimonides, best known as Rambam, who said that the greatest level of giving is to strengthen one's hand until they no longer need to be dependent on others. And this is actually codified in the teaching, the 8 steps of the giving ladder. So the lowest being giving less than one should, to giving before or asked, and then actually really the top of the ladder being giving in a way that helps someone to be self-supporting. Next slide. And that leads us to today in terms of the work that I've done for the past couple of years at the organization. So what does our impact lending portfolio look like to date? So we have loaned, we're about 25 million loaned cumulatively. Some of those loans have started to come back to us. We have 97 participating philanthropic funds who have recommended those loans out of about 1,100 philanthropic funds here at the organization. And we are working with 15 community lending partners in the Jewish community and then outside the Jewish community, addressing a host of issues or different issue areas, from small business relief to affordable housing development to smallholder farmers. Next slide. So we have our, what I'm calling Kahila or community portfolio, and that's around building that Jewish community. And we have, I'd say half of our portfolio is focused on that, and that's with non-for-profit lenders in Israel, as well as organizations here in the Bay Area doing that type of work. Next slide. So then we've got our tzedakah, or tzedek, that's pursuing justice, and Tikkun Olam, healing the world portfolio. So those are Jewish values lending, and that is around supporting small business relief through local CDFIs here who do small business lending, and national CDFI funds doing a lending in the South. We focus on affordable housing development, education and training, as well as working with some local CDFIs. That's both California Farm Link and RCAC here in California, supporting rural farmers and rural communities. Next slide. So why CDFIs and nonprofit community lenders? For us, it's about the track record of impact in those communities. And we're really proud to be one of the many investors helping to facilitate the outcomes achieved by these partners, highlighted here in 2021 around job retention, new homes built, sustainable farmland purchases. That's really been the driver of our work and the work we've been doing with CDFIs. Next slide. So what's next? Sorry. So what's next for us? I encourage everyone to go to our inaugural impact investing report. It'll give you an even more deeper dive in the organizations and the stories of the borrowers behind that. And for us, it's really scaling our work beyond the 25 million, carving out more of that AUM towards community lending, as well as getting more and more of our donors involved. Again, we have an 1,100 fund portfolio, and we are at about 100 funds, and we're sort of still early on in our impact investing journey and have a long runway to go. And we're looking forward to partnering with more CDFIs and deploying more of our philanthropic capital. Thanks, Tom. Back over to you.
Well, thank you, Andrew. That's an awesome track record in a few years. So keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Our next panelist is John Harris, and John has been in numerous financial leadership roles in the Episcopal Church for many years, including being a member and advisor to finance and investment committees and a member of the oversight committee of the Episcopal Church Foundation in New York. John, it's a pleasure to meet you virtually, and you're up. You're muted too. Can you unmute yourself? Should have a little microphone.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Good.
David, can you hear me now? Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Derek, and thank you for the rest of the panel. I don't have any slides. I thought I would just kind of do a narrative and share my journey, I guess, in the Episcopal Church, and both in the area of social justice, anti-racism, and what is now impact investing. First of all, I'm 85 years old. I graduated from high school in 1954, which is the year of Brown versus the Board of Education. And my family, we moved to Ohio, a community called Lincoln Heights, which is a suburb of Cincinnati. Lincoln Heights was a first Black municipality north of the Mason-Dixon line, founded back in 1946. So for a 17-year-old to be moving into a community where everybody who ran the town, the mayor, the fire chief, the police, were all Black people, was quite a delight. My introduction to the Episcopal Church was we had a local parish that also had a school, and my youngest son attended that school, and I got involved with the Parent Teachers Association. And at some point, the rector of the school at that time invited me to join the church, and this was at the height of the civil rights movement. And the church was very involved in that. So that was my introduction to the Episcopal Church. Shortly after that, I was asked to serve at the diocesan level. The Diocese of Southern Ohio was just initiating what it called then the Institutional Racism Project. It was probably the first initiative in the Episcopal Church at that time, which was around 1969. By 1972, the committee had done its action research for 3 years and came forth with recommendations in terms of how to begin to address the issue of racism, at least in the Diocese of Southern Ohio, which as part of that recommendation was a component that we call at that time minority empowerment. And that called for the diocese setting aside $100,000 a year to help empower minority businesses. Now, this is in 1972, okay? As a result of that, the diocese did we had what was at that time a Black savings and loan. This before all the savings and loans and the consolidation of the finance industry. So the diocese put on deposit a $100,000 CD, which was then used as a link deposit to build houses in the community of Lincoln Heights via the church. That was my first introduction to what now is known as impact investing. I also got involved with a group within the Episcopal Church called the Union of Black Episcopalians. The Union of Black Episcopalians came about in 1968. My first involvement was in the 70s, but by the 1980s, I was on the national board and served on that group up until about 4 years ago. I was the president, and for 25 years, I served as treasurer. And served on the Episcopal Church Foundation Board, which I still serve as an advisor to the Investment Committee and the Oversight Committee of the Episcopal Church Foundation. Now, the Episcopal Church has several entities that are involved in impact investing as we know it today. First of all, as I mentioned, the Episcopal Church Foundation, but the church also has what is called the Church Pension Group. The Church Pension Group is the entity that manages the endowment for the pension fund for all the clergy and employees in the church, and has developed a very sophisticated using social impact investment as part of its portfolio. If you want to learn more about that group and the kind of investments that they're doing throughout the country, that's cpg.org, churchpensiongroup.org, cpg.org. And the website for the Episcopal Church Foundation is ecf.org. I want to also refer you to a book. One of the staff people at the Episcopal Church Foundation, James Murphy, wrote a book called Faithful Investing: The Power of Decisive Action and Incremental Change. It's a compendium of stories that give examples of different how church and faith groups have used their investments and their endowment portfolios to do both advocacy work as well as impacting communities throughout the country. I commend this to you. As I mentioned, the Union of Black Episcopalians, which was formed back in 1968, the purpose of the UBE, as we call it, was to eradicate racism in the Episcopal Church. Of course, that has expanded to not only eradicate racism in the Episcopal Church, but also in society and the world. Over the years, anti-racism has been the focus of the work and also the church itself. In more recent years, the conversation has kind of switched to acknowledge that while fighting racism is what we aspire to continue, but the bishops of the church took on a task of creating what is called the beloved community for the Episcopal Church. And they created a task force that was charged with looking at what does it look like for the Episcopal Church to become the beloved community from a theological perspective. And that book was just published this year. It's called Realizing Black Community, a report from the House of Bishops Theology Committee. And one of the things that the bishops have done is that they have taken on, and in my opinion, has switched the conversation from anti-racism to what the real issue is, and that is white supremacy, as they define it here, white supremacy, the American exceptionalism, and the third item, the Anglo-Saxon myth. So the Anglo-Saxon myth, white supremacy, and the American exceptionalism is where they are saying that we need to look at that and tell our stories. And the bishops went through a 5-year process in coming up with this study. And that has also led to some of our diocesan institutions around the church who have come up with their own response to reparations. So this study has kind of informed a lot of institutions within the church in terms of how they might address the issue around reparations. In the Diocese of Southern Ohio, where I still am canonically resident, we are just embarking upon a reparations study and program. In 2025 will be the 150th anniversary of the diocese. And we hope to have gone through the process of looking at the history, telling the story of the diocese. How did the church participate in racism, in slavery, the civil rights movement, redlining, and all the things that have been a detriment to people of color, and come to some conclusion about how we will address the issue of reparations. The diocese over the years, through the trustees, we have an endowment fund, the Proctor Fund, that we do continue to do investing, community investing. We have a fund that we've given $1 million to a group in Columbus, Ohio, that are used for loans to small businesses in the Columbus area. A similar program exists in the Cincinnati area. And the Diocese of Southern Ohio is also a very rural area. And we have units that are using funds to help with regenerative farming in our rural area of the state. That's kind of what I wanted to share with you. I've had a long history of working in the church. I kind of consider myself a midwife, helping to bring people together to birth projects, and then hopefully they can be self-directed on their own and be there to nurture them and continue on.
John, that was awesome. I don't know if everybody caught that second book, Realizing.
Yeah, Realizing Beloved Community. It's a report from the House of Bishops Theology Committee.
Okay.
And for me, the significance of this book, given the history and my involvement in, dismantling racism, that I think the bishops have redefined the work ahead. Although it still gets at dismantling racism, but the real work is dealing with the issues and telling the story around white supremacy and the Anglo-Saxon myth that has created this whole kind of identity of white and everybody else.
Well, that's awesome, John. Have you thought about writing a book?
I have written, yes, I have. And it's probably about 90% done. I just need to get some professionals now to help me get it to print. And it's a reflection of my life. As I said, I'm 85 years old, very grateful that I've lived this long to see the changes in the church and in society. And yes, so a book is in the works.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing, John.
Yeah.
Our final panelist is Sarah Smith, and she has spent over 30 years working in the community development field in various roles. She is currently the director of Mercy Partnership Fund, where she oversees a portfolio that includes below market rate investments to more than 60 mission-driven organizations working around the globe. And you heard me right, that is, basically below market returns. And she has job security. So it's all yours, Sarah.
Well, good evening and thanks, Tom. Happy to be here on the panel with other colleagues in the faith-based investing community. What I wanted to do today was just to give some background about our program as well as the Sisters of Mercy's community investing journey, and then give a couple of examples of our investments. Mercy Partnership Fund is the global community investing program of Mercy Investment Services. And Mercy Investment Services is the socially responsible investing ministry of the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas, a Catholic women's religious congregation. You could think of Mercy Investment Services as the family office for the Sisters of Mercy, which uses socially responsible investing, so corporate engagement, portfolio screens, proxy voting, in addition to impact investing, to both support the lives of the sisters in the various ministries, as well as promoting systemic change and responding to critical needs, such as addressing the racial wealth divide. As the community investing arm, we provide below market rate investments to mission-driven organizations that provide high social and environmental impact. We're able to be flexible in the loan terms that we can provide, but we're not a foundation, so we do need to be paid back. As some of you may know, the Sisters of Mercy, along with other religious communities, were among the pioneers in impact investing, with the journey going back nearly 5 decades. As an outgrowth of the civil rights movement, many religious communities, including the Sisters of Mercy, started exploring community investing as a way to directly support needs in their communities, while also maintaining resources that they needed to support their own ministries. Often the Sisters of Mercy were the first or an early investor, providing low interest loans to what at the time were fledgling loan funds and nonprofit organizations, as well as deposits in newly formed credit unions that were addressing the lack of affordable housing, affordable financial services in the low wealth communities. The sisters, I think, saw early on that what we call today impact investments were a way of putting their resources on mission, and that the investment of financial resources was indeed a ministry of itself. So fast forward to today, we continue to build on the great work that they did those decades ago by providing below market rate investments to mission aligned organizations as well as funds. So we look at these organizations in effect as being our boots on the ground, that with our funds that are frequently combined with those of others, with the specific investment decisions made by the organization itself, which has a pulse on the needs of the respective communities and the markets that they serve. Our investments continue to be guided by the Sisters of Mercy's deep concern for persons who are economically poor, and in particular, the needs identified through their critical concerns, which include racism, concern for women, immigration, care for the earth, as well as nonviolence. Our policy allocates between 1% and 5% of all the invested assets to the community investing program. And today, as Tom mentioned, we have community investments in more than 60 organizations that are benefiting individuals in 67 countries and in all 50 states. Since 1995, we've provided more than 120 million in community investments to more than 140 organizations that were driving social change. The majority of our US investments have been to community development financial institutions. And if Andrew could hit the next slide, I'd like to start to highlight a few. We have a long history of supporting community development credit unions and banks. Our deposits into these federally insured institutions are an effective way to reach under-resourced communities. Established in the 1920s as South Carolina's first African-American-owned bank, Optus Bank focuses on helping people who otherwise would not have access to capital to gain the resources needed for social and economic mobility. Deposits from Mercy and other socially motivated investors have enabled Optus to expand its banking services with the ultimate goal of helping to close the racial wealth gap in America. Next slide, please. Latino Community Credit Union was founded in 2000 as a grassroots response to a wave of robberies and muggings of Latino immigrants in Durham, North Carolina. Since then, it has become a model of credit unions and loan funds seeking to serve unbanked individuals and immigrant communities. Its lending programs are now helping to bridge the Latino wealth gap. Next slide, please. In addition to supporting CDFI credit unions directly through deposits, Mercy has worked closely for many years with Inclusive, which is formerly the National Federation of Community Development Credit Unions, to promote financial inclusion and racial equity. Most recently, we've worked with Inclusive as part of their Racial Equity Investment Fund, which they established to deploy secondary capital loans to credit unions that are led by and or serve communities of color. And this has increased the resources that those credit unions have available to lend to minority-owned businesses, homeowners, and consumers. Next slide, please. OISTA Corporation is the nation's longest standing Native community development financial institution intermediary that provides financial products and development services exclusively to Native CDFIs and Native communities. OISTA supports CDFIs working in some of the nation's most vulnerable communities. The Sisters of Mercy were early supporters of OISTA and later expanded their support when the organization launched its Native American Disaster Recovery Fund to provide resources for COVID-19 recovery efforts in tribal communities. And next and final slide. I'd like to conclude with an example of how influential even small community investments can be. New Hampshire Community Loan Fund was established in 1983 to help residents of mobile homes establish resident-owned manufactured housing cooperatives, thus creating long-term affordability. The Sisters of Mercy provided the fund with its first loan in the amount of $43,000 to establish its first resident-owned community. That early loan laid the foundation for the growth of the fund, whose lending exceeds $100 million and supports affordable housing, childcare, and small businesses. According to Julie Eads, who is the founding CEO, the check was hand-delivered to her personally by a Sister of Mercy with these instructions: do something good with it and be sure to pay us back. The loan fund paid the sisters back on time and with interest and has become one of the premier CDFIs in the country. Not only did the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund pay their first loan back, but so has every other CDFI to which we have lent. While our overall repayment rate from borrowers exceeds 99%, the repayment rate in our CDFI portfolio is 100%. We're so grateful that we've been able to continue the mission of the Sisters of Mercy through this ministry, while positively impacting under-resourced communities throughout the United States, and hope others will choose to do so as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah. That was great. Now, Derek will take it from here.
Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you, everyone, for being with us this evening and really just taking the time to be with us. You know, we're attempting to not only do these series to inform, but also build a community. And so I am really inspired and have learned a lot from the panelists. And I think the best way to kind of sum up some of the stories that we've heard is that under this metaphor of beloved community, there's this belief that traditional top-down measures to alleviate poverty are historically exhausted. And so these measures have been rigidly associated with crime, violence, brokenness, and despair, and developing strategies that address poverty by focusing on fixing what's wrong. And the approach of beloved community focuses not only on changing a community's economic circumstances, but also changing the communal story and the communal narrative. And changing the communal story really shifts the question from how can we fix what's wrong to how do we create a life for people carved out of their own imagination. And so this approach of beloved community maintains that you can't have enduring economic and social change by building on a community's brokenness. You must begin with the community's strengths. And so there is a hidden wholeness beneath the brokenness that must be foregrounded for integral development and for integral investment to dismantle racism, for that to really be happening. And so there's some principles that I've learned about beloved community. And one is that life is a sacred trust, worthy to be regarded with reverence and awe. The equal dignity of the human person. We must value and respect life in all its diversity. The sharing of knowledge and resources as indispensable conditions for achieving beloved communities. Equal access and participation in the power structures of society in order to regenerate the common good in the spirit of Jubilee. And then lastly, is the integrity of creation, securing the earth's bounty and beauty for present and future generations. And so this is what beloved community means to me. And this is how I'm able to relate to the stories and the great information we learned from the panelists. So we're at 8:30. And so we're a little bit behind time, but I did want to open up for discussion and, you know, and to have a panel discussion, be able to field any questions that you all may have. I have a couple, but wanted to open it up to the floor to see if there were any questions and or anything that anybody would like to share about what resonated with them based on what you heard. And also, if you're not comfortable speaking, you're more than welcome to put your question in the chat. And so just to start off for the panel, and I think I can open this question up for any of the panelists, but would like to hear from a few of you. Just what do you all think are the crossroads and the roadblocks that you all are feeling in your work today? And I know that could be a loaded question, but this is for the panelists. What are the roadblocks and what are some of the crossroads that you're feeling in the work that you described tonight? Andrew, John, Vanessa, Sarah?
I'm happy to speak.
Sure.
I go. So I think, and I assume a lot of people here are with a faith-based institution. Maybe you're trying to talk to your faith-based institution, whether it's a church or synagogue or other, about making these moves. The challenge is the typical people who are around the table are the finance people. And it's usually older, white males. And so bringing up what we've talked, I'm glad that actually several of us have used words like reparations and dismantling white supremacy. That's what the work is about, and they get very uncomfortable, has been my experience when we use those words. But I think it's really important too. So it's about how to really bring this up. And so that's why one of the first things I recommend with groups that are moving on this is really to build a team of advocates, social justice advocates, to come together and do something like read a book together. You know, you've heard a couple of book recommendations tonight, and try to bring those finance people to the table and start the conversation that way. And here's the thing, CDFIs, this is an easy on-ramp because it's hard to, I mean, and that's what we're saying, you know, if you've got idle cash, this is a great way to use your idle cash. And over the past really 12 years, it was actually really fantastic because it was paying a whole lot more than the banks were. And if you, so anyway, so that's my challenge has been the sort of, well, does it meet our risk factors? And this is so new and so different. And so just those kind of blockages I found to be challenging, but we made it through by actually, one of the big things I did was recommended and went through a process of doing a request for proposals. And we got a woman named Erica Seth Davies to come in and train us on what is racial justice investing. And again, we're kind of in a different space now because I'm trying to get them to move even further than CDFIs, but that was amazingly helpful to have another voice someone who has established something called the Racial Equity Asset Lab, has this matrix and tool that says, are you doing colorblind investing or are you really doing racial justice investing? So getting more training, reading books together, really developing your team, I think is one way to get past some of the absolute pushbacks you're going to get.
Vanessa, you hit on a couple themes for me in our journey, and I'll say we're early on in it in terms of educating our donors. We started with just public, we started with donor advised fund pools and endowment pools focused simply on traditional investing, run by generally the older generation of donors in our community, and really getting them to understand that this is philanthropic capital, that investing in CDFIs are on lower risk, and a way to maximize the impact of the capital has been one of the messages that I keep hitting. And then obviously for our organizations and investing in professional staff like myself, my colleagues, to begin to build that program, to begin to have those conversations with a donor has been able to move the needle. And then identifying needs for us to, fortunately, unfortunately, COVID for a lot of communities exposed a lot of, challenges, and that was for us, allowed us to really dive in quickly into this work, and it's only sort of scaled from there.
Thank you, Vanessa and Andrew. Sarah or John, would you like to comment on just any crossroads or roadblocks that you currently feel in your work today?
I think one of our challenges is we're a fairly small team within a larger organization. So we're a two-person shop that focuses on the community investing portfolio, although we have backup for accounting, communications, business services. So, so we have time constraints and a lot of good opportunities out there. So one of the things that we've become more intentional about is collaborating with peers in terms of doing diligencing, looking at opportunities, getting feedback. And there's just such a growing, robust ecosystem of the faith-based investing community that it's been exciting to be part of that growth. And I think it's gonna continue to just blossom in terms of possibilities.
John, yeah.
Vanessa, you just hit on something that I have experienced and continue to experience, and that is being in the room with people who are looking through the prism of performance and the numbers and helping them to see the ministry, the theology, or the impact. And that's, although it's been incremental, that's why I think I'm excited about this new report that the bishops have put out, because it's coming from the white bishops primarily. Okay, that racism, not racism, but white supremacy is the issue, and that we need to deal with it as brothers and sisters. I think had it come from another source, it might not have received the same kind of attention that it is getting now. It would not have been welcome, let's say it like that.
Thank you all. And you all bring up some good points. So kind of moving on to my next question. Well, first of all, is there any questions or comments from the participants? So we have a question. Is there an evaluation tool or set of criteria for view when it comes to a potential CDFI? And Connie, would you want to elaborate on that question? Are you basically just asking if there's an evaluation tool or set of criteria for potential CDFIs when they invest?
That's right. I'm part of the Loretta community, and that's something that we'll be looking at, or maybe already are, and I don't know. But CDFI means that there would be a different kind of relationship with some community, right? And I assume that the way you're talking about it doesn't mean that you necessarily live there or have a relationship there, but I don't know. How do you evaluate, how do you get into, how do you identify a CFI that you want to invest in?
I'll jump in and do a little.
Sure, Vanessa, go ahead.
So like I said, the data is pretty available. If you go to cdfifund.gov, that is the U.S. Treasury CDFI fund, and there is a database that you can literally download it into Excel of all of the CDFIs that exist and have been certified. There's also on that same site, there is a searchable database of all of the CDFIs that have been funded. So to become a CDFI, you have to meet 7 criteria that sort of are just fact-based. And you do have to submit data to prove that you are a lender or an investor and that you have committed to your primary mission of really serving the underserved and doing community development. So certification does not go through any kind of financial due diligence or there's no review of a business plan. However, funding does involve a very rigorous competitive process. So if a CDFI has been funded, if you find them in the funded database that again is on that site, they have been through U.S. Treasury CDFI fund rigorous process. I just, now that I'm retired, actually, they use outside consultants. So I've been a consultant just reading the latest round of applicants and very, very exciting to read those. And so, yeah, there's at least, 2 or 3 people who read each application. There's a whole business plan that's reviewed. So that's the kind of review that they've already been through. We at the UU Common Endowment Fund, we have a tool that if a CDFI wants to come through or any kind of community investment wants to be included in our portfolio, I developed essentially an application that talks about what we want to receive and, asking them some specific questions that the CDFI fund doesn't, ask, sort of what is your commitment to anti-racism and, that kind of thing. And that is what I'll do is I'll find and I'll put that link in the chat if you want to look at that tool. But yeah, that would be something you and your committees would think about. Well, if we're looking at CDFIs, do we want to do more due diligence on top of what the CDFI fund has already done if they've already been funded? And if not, then what are the other criteria we want to look at? There's a lot of data about each CDFI on the site, though. I'll leave it at that unless you have other questions there.
Thanks, Vanessa.
And Derek,
else?
Yeah. Let me jump in for just a minute here.
Sure.
We have a tremendous resource in Pam Porter, who has over a decade with Opportunity Finance Network, and through the American Sustainable Business Network and our Investor Circle group, Pam reached out over the last 2 years to identify out of the 1,300 funds, as I mentioned earlier, there's 70 of them that are equipped, and maybe more. We hope there's more, and let us know, that can accept funding from individuals and institutions. So I popped it in the chat, and maybe I don't know if Andrew wants to share it on the screen, but I will send that as a follow-up. So Pam has put together a very great list of resources as well as funds, because you'll find out that even though these funds welcome investments, it's still not easy. There's still a lot of SEC requirements, and so it's not a seamless process, but it's a very worthwhile process. So as Janet Yellen will tell us, that every dollar invested in a local CDFI equals $8 worth of impact. So it's worth a minute or 2 of our time, and we'll make sure and send that resource to people. So thank you.
Thanks, Babby. Any other comments from the panelists or the participants on Connie's question around criteria? I would like to get back to, John, something you had brought up around the risk returns and the risk management and the returns and some of the factors of that we have to deal with when it comes into investing in BIPOC communities. what are the barriers you see around kind of those issues? And that's not just for John, but anybody. But John, you brought it up, so it kind of made me think about it. And you're muted, John, if you are talking.
Yeah. The trustees of the Proctor Fund for the Diocese of Southern Ohio, as well as the investment committee for the Episcopal Church Foundation, have allocated a portion of the corpus of its investment portfolio to be used for impact investing, and can make and are making some low interest loans that are being offset by earnings on the rest of the portfolio. So that has been a way to carve out some of the corpus that can be set aside for investing, rather than giving out grants, that kind of thing, you know. But making it, carrying on the books as an asset that we know we're not going to get the same return for those, because they're allocated for low interest loans for certain projects. So it's designated funds, and it's offset by earnings on the other part of it. We're hitting the benchmark on the entire portfolio.
Thank you, John.
And that's kind of a decision is made every year in terms of how much would be allocated for that purpose. Yeah. And of course, that's monitored quarterly as we meet with the fund managers to look at, you know, what the performance has been.
Any other comments, Sarah or
if I could just add a couple comments. Within our community investment portfolio, we try to balance it in a lot of ways. One is geographically, but within the CDFI portion of the portfolio, we're really deliberate about making room for newer, smaller CDFIs, as well as larger, more established CDFIs, and have some flexibility with rate depending on the needs of the organization. So by design, we hope that we're making room for early CDFIs on their journey that might not be getting the resource support that they have, that others are getting, to help them strengthen their financial strength. At the same time, internally, it's balanced by those that are more established.
Yeah, we deploy a similar approach to Sarah in terms of that balance, but I think John hit it the most. I mean, in terms of focusing, whether it's the BIPOC community or any other sort of underserved or underbanked community, it's low interest, it's below market being the focus. And for us, it's really positioning it as an extension of grant making. So you can make a grant or you can make a loan, and those funds get recycled and then come back to us. And I think that's been a sort of a valuable positioning on it. But I think the focus is really about impact first for us, and really below market, and trying to stay there even as the market dynamics shift.
Well, thank you all. And so before, I guess I do want to we have about 10 minutes left. And so I do want to leave some space open to discuss kind of what the panelists may see as possibilities for the future of CDFIs. You know, what are some possibilities and some things that you are hopeful that, you know, you could see kind of changing in the future? And that could be around policy change, that could be around just bringing more awareness to CDFIs and the attention of leveraging these investment vehicles to dismantle racism and oppression. But, you know, anything that kind of comes to mind, what are just some possibilities that you see around the future of CDFIs? And we would love to hear from every one of you, whoever wants to start.
Let me get my 2 cents. I think that the fact that CDFIs really went above and beyond during the pandemic for borrowers in so many ways. And, as a result of that, had an opportunity to shine in the national spotlight, resulting in additional federal resources being channeled to them now. In addition to that, more corporate exposure. So there's significant additional resources that have been that are being channeled. And I think one of the more recent programs is the emergency capital investment funds that have been made available to community development banks and credit unions to help them enhance their lending as well. And I think that that's a great trend for the future, to be able to access new types of federal resources to amplify the resources that CDFIs are able to have on their own. So I think that there's a role for us in helping to fill some gaps that may be available in the future. I think one thing we hear from the CDFIs that we support are that we don't include any strings, any geographic strings or any thematic strings. The CDFI itself makes the decision. Sometimes banks and other lenders have certain geographic constraints, and our view is the more flexible that we can be, the better. I think that's appreciated, and I hope we're able to continue that.
Thank you, Sarah. Very valuable information.
I'll add, sort of in a policy vein, we really like to see foundations continue to focus on program-related investments, PRIs, and then leveraging the use of PRIs with CDFIs. I know that there is not there's a small amount of foundations leveraging the use of PRIs, and so I think you could, by connecting CDFIs or CDFI investments with the use of PRIs, I think that would also flow more and more capital from foundations, private foundations, into CDFIs.
Thank you, Andrew. And let's see, I think we have is that Jill? Do you have
Yes.
or do you have, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Derek.
Go ahead.
I just want to say how much I appreciate all of the vast wealth of information that all of you have provided. I've been on the UU of Shelter Rock SRI committee, and Vanessa Lowe and Amanda Jacob have been amazingly helpful in providing us with resources, because there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, and they've done everything that we need to vet and find out information. So we're in the process of looking through everything that UUCEF has been doing to invest. And in that vein, maybe a couple of others on our committee would like to look at some of the other organizations here, such as the Mercy Partnership Fund, a Jewish Community Federation. Do you have ways that our SRI can reach out to either one of you that are here from those two organizations or other people to find out more about, the tentacles of how we can go out there for investments?
I think our contact information is being put in the chat if it isn't there already, but happy to have a conversation offline and share more about our experiences and potential connections for you.
Wonderful. Thank
Yes,
you.
definitely use me as a resource.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. As we're wrapping up, are there any questions for the panelists or comments? Vanessa, I don't know if you're talking. But
Yeah,
you're...
sorry.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
I was muted. You have to have at least one of those on every Zoom. So sorry about that. I just wanted to quickly give my answer to your last question about sort of what's the future. The fact that now we're really talking about reparations and dismantling white supremacy is time to acknowledge that even the CDFI industry has been sometimes what I call the plantation environment. Most of the leaders have been, white males. And so I love that now there is something called the African American Alliance of CDFI CEOs, and I've put that in the chat. And so they are working on really sort of how do we concentrate on really trying to help, clear the, make some movements towards closing the racial wealth gap and really focusing on the African American community. So I think following them, looking at what they're doing, looking at their membership, because one of the main things that's needed is really to trust the people who you're trying to help to be the leaders of that. And that hasn't always been the case with the CDFI industry.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, well, we're at near the top of the hour. I want to thank all of our panelists for the great wealth of information that you have given us tonight. There was, I think, one final question. What was the name again of the credit union with the focus on Native Americans?
And Derek, I popped that in the chat, and I think
You
Pam's
did.
gonna take us out tonight.
Okay, turn it over to you, Pam. Thank you.
Okay, well, great. Thank you, everyone. Vanessa, Andrew, John, Sarah. I could listen to the four of you talk forever. Fantastic. We did just want to make sure everyone is aware of the many resources to find CDFIs and to find the coalitions, such as the one Vanessa just mentioned, as well as other coalitions you can find on the ASBN website. I've just given a little screenshot. The paper that Babby mentioned, we have identified 70 CDFIs that are ready tomorrow to take investments from individual or institutions. They have note programs that are very easy to invest in. There's a much broader set of CDFIs that institutions can invest in, but sometimes there's a little bit more paperwork involved in those. So I just want to highlight a couple of next steps on the next slide. We are going to continue this conversation next week on the 14th. We will have specific examples of how you can get started with community investing for individuals and institutions. And we're going to be showcasing 3 individual investors who have just gotten started and begun their journeys. And then you see we have 2 other sessions that you can learn more about and register for on the ASBN website. And we're really interested in hearing from you. How can we answer your questions, support your journeys, so that more of you are able to tell the types of stories that we heard today from our 4 amazing panelists. So thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a great day. And we hope to continue to engage with you. So I think with that, we'll say thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
And please reach out to
you,
any of us if
everybody.
you want to help shape this work going forward. We'd love to have your input. This is just the beginning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.